What's happening, people? Welcome to the Realist debates with Lengman Joseph from around the ways, aka Joey Leng, aka just call me Joey, please.
Oh yes, it's myself, the realist one, Jay, and we have a special guest today again.
Yeah, I'm your favourite, back again for round two.
Back again?
I'm just giving myself that title, your favourite. But yeah, it's Rams, and that's it. I think I called myself Little Old Rams the last time, and I feel like I'm not that little or that old, so I just stuck with Rams.
You can identify as whoever you want to be here. It's
And
a safe space.
that brings us on to today's topic.
Exactly.
Yes, literally. So yeah, we're pretty much going to be talking about everything gender and sexuality. And I think what first kind of spurned this off was, I think we was watching Sex Education and we were just talking about it.
Not together, by the way.
Yeah, no.
just to throw that out there.
Yeah, just bouncing the old message and it's like, oh yeah, man, like what's man watching? Yeah, Sex Education, new season's out, and yeah, so kind of what was everyone's thoughts about the new season that came out?
Well, you can go actually. Yeah.
To be fair, I haven't delved into it as much as I would have liked to yet. But based on like the whole sex ed series so far, like I feel like the message that they're trying to communicate is important. And I think it's quite funny because the way they've kind of gone about it, I feel like really kind of reflects what education's like in school. Like the kids are in the toilets doing their own little sex ed lessons and like talking to each other, and the information that gets shared in classrooms then spills out into the playground, and it kind of then switches up a little bit. It's kind of like Chinese whispers with sex ed. But I think as a whole, the show's good. It's a laugh. It puts a bit of a spin on it, and I think it's a good space to learn but watch an enjoyable show at the same time.
So would you say they're hitting the nail on the head when it comes to like school reflections?
I mean, I wouldn't say 100%. I wouldn't say 100%. I think it's very Americanized.
Yeah.
Which is
I hear that, yeah.
Interesting because like even like the varsity jackets and the
Saved
squads
by the Bell
and
vibes,
yeah, and I'm like, this is England, you know? Like this is not what kids are like in school. They should have had them in their uniform. I guess that's the whole thing with the new season is they're now kind of a little bit more like a normal school. But yeah, I don't know. I think schools are very different. There's a wide variety of schools, and what you see in like I've come from a sex ed background. I taught sex ed for 3 years. I worked for a charity, so it was slightly different in terms of our approach because we weren't as, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like we didn't like pussyfoot around it. Like we just kind of said it as it was. And I think it's because we didn't have the whole kind of school politics that you get and like parent politics, because at the end of the day, I come in, do my session and peace. And you have to deal with the repercussions. As long as it's age appropriate and I've delivered what I'm supposed to deliver, you're going to pay me my coin and I'm going to go home. And then if parents want to complain about it later, that's up to them. But I think like sex ed is good because it kind of keeps pushing the message that you need to talk about sex ed in schools, and the curriculum needs to be very holistic. Otherwise you end up with kids who do their own shit in the school toilets, and then that creates a whole drama in itself.
And one thing that you said earlier about the whole Chinese whisper aspect is is so true. Like I remember my first day of school, I was what would have been like, what was reception like? 5, 6 years old?
5? Yeah, 5.
Yeah,
4.5, 5, something like that.
I remember because I started school kind of late, so I started like kind of March in the school year. So I didn't really know everyone and stuff, but I got put on this table and I remember this one girl, she was like we was chatting and she was like to me, oh, do you know what sex is? And I was
She
like,
was on smoke.
I was like, what? Come on, man.
What? Hold on. Let's go back to the age here. Did
Yes.
man say 5 or 6?
Yeah, bro. First day of school,
Stuck it on, man, like that.
it was smoke. Stuck it on, man. It's asking me, yeah, do you know what sex is? I'm saying, listen, man's Leng Man Joseph from around the ways, aka Joey Leng, but you can just call me Joey. Of course I know what sex is. But hang on. You know, reverse card, do you know what sex is? So she's told me what she thinks, because yeah, I'm like you said, I'm 5'6". I don't know what the fuck that is.
I'm surprised at these questions. I didn't even know at them times.
So she's told me, but she said it's like, it's where a man puts like the penis in the bum. And that's where the babies and that come out.
Wow, she's elevated levels.
Yeah, so for ages, while she's describing some form of sex, she's got things all jumbled up. Yeah. So obviously, what I'm not saying is teach 4, 5, 6-year-olds. That is mad early. So, however, there's lots of information out there that causes all of these Chinese whispers.
So a big part of my job used to be talking about age-appropriate sexualized behavior and thinking about like how the curriculum is approached, but also helping professionals spot the signs of like kids who potentially displaying like harmful behaviors. Yeah. And it's quite interesting that you say that at 5 this girl's talking about sex and you're thinking anal sex and not having the terminology to talk about it properly, but kind of having a bit of an understanding, which suggests that she's been exposed to, or somebody said something to her, she's relaying information and not quite relayed it properly. But in terms of like developmentally, for kids to be curious about sex, like not knowing the ins and outs of sex, but to be curious about, you know, hugging and kissing and all the things that come with it, it's quite normal at that age. You'd be really, really surprised the amount of like 5-year-olds who are like, they'll use the term sex, not really knowing what sex means because they've heard the language, but maybe associate sex with holding hands or kissing each other or whatever, like showing some form of affection. So I don't think she was wilding. She was really wilding.
Stuff.
But at the same time, the curiosity isn't a bad thing. What I would be concerned about is who told you that? Where did you hear it? Yeah. And it could be a case of, it could be an older sibling who's also in that learning phase and thinking about, or has been taught something at school and maybe hasn't relayed it appropriately to her. But that would be a learning opportunity for me. Like I'd sit down and talk to that little kid. I wouldn't take it as okay, no, you don't do that, you don't talk about that, and shut it down and like walk away and pretend like nothing ever happened, which is what a lot of parents do. But yeah, it's kind of funny because
I want to come back to that education bit in a second, actually, because that is very important. Just quickly, my thoughts on sex ed itself. I thought the show was very interesting. I feel like it does show what kids are like, but I just felt that the setting was wrong. So, I mean, for example, how they put it in this like mad private school in the middle of nowhere. I think it's set in Wales, is it?
Yeah,
Wales?
I think it's like, Wales.
I mean, it's not unrealistic for these kids in Wales to be having these thoughts, but I think they would have hit a larger scale of people if they put it in like a normal school, for example, then showed what normal, because I agree with the thoughts and the processes that the kids are going through. To me, that rings kind of true, but then the setting to me is just, it didn't ring home to me because it wasn't something I could relate to.
It was a touch out of reality almost.
So I was like, okay, yeah, like I could relate to them kids, but way out there in the sticks, this is how these kids are moving wild like this. Like so yeah, if it was a bit more public schoolish, then I think I could have related to it even more. But saying that, I do feel that the way they showed the kids expressing themselves is a very, very good thing. Very good thing.
I think it's interesting that you say that because, like, for me, like when I came to this country, we initially like lived in Colindale, Northwest London. my mom made sure that she, not get her in trouble here, put our names down to say that we lived at my grandma's house so that we could go to a better school in Harrow. Allegedly. And obviously, like, went to primary school in Harrow and secondary school in Harrow, and quite good ones at that. And then we moved to Surrey, where we were basically a minority. There was like 4 black kids in my entire school. And it kind of, it was like a complete like flip. So I'd gone from going to Catholic schools where they don't talk about sex anyway, but the little bit of chatter you hear in the playground, like, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or because like all the kids were like pretty much black, or there was a good like mix of kids in our school. There wasn't much conversation. Like, they weren't wilding, they weren't doing much. I don't know if it was because their parents had them on lock like mine did, or what the case may be. But then going to Surrey, being in quite a posh school, still like mainstream normal school, but quite a posh school, kind of like that whole sex education type vibes in the middle of nowhere, and just full of white kids wilding. Like, honestly wilding. Like, some of the things that I heard and saw as like getting into like year 9, year 8, year 9, unbelievable scenes. That's all I would say. Like, we had this one girl, and I'm sure it was like year 10, and like she was pregnant. And it was after like a number of times of kind of being told that she was pregnant, but never fully seeing it. So it kept seeming like she was in situations, having sex, getting to the point of maybe 3 months and deciding to abort. This happened like maybe 4 times in our school year.
So
and eventually...
a serial killer. Let's be real about it.
Like, honestly, like, there were some wild things, and I thought to myself, nah, this can't be right, especially not in this type of school in year 10.
I don't want to pretend, Mum. Not here or anywhere.
I love that you're not afraid to be yourself, Eric. Maybe one day I get there too. But it takes time.
I'm sorry for scaring you, Mum.
I make you something to eat.
When I was younger, things were a bit different, and even down to, for example, being gay, like, it was frowned upon. Do you understand? To the point where, obviously, I won't go through the insulting words, but when you were shouting that at a man, whether he was straight or not, you were saying that to insult him. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's mad how from then to now, you know, we have made some progress.
Yeah, like, I think we've definitely made progress, and I don't want to like be Debbie Downer here, but I think it's really frustrating that a lot of the reasons why people are quieter about their homophobia, I think that's the word I should use, quieter about their homophobia and choose not to be twats, is because of the fear of getting in trouble or what the consequences mean. You know, like, you know, you might end up getting arrested or going to prison. And I think even in schools we talk about like homophobia, biphobic and transphobic bullying, and like have those conversations with kids from a young age. But I think for a lot of them, they still don't recognize like why these conversations are being had. The conversations are being had because you should just mind your own business. If who I fuck don't make you come, like, why are you here? Like, why are you involved? A lot of people are so... I said, who I fuck don't make you come, mind your own business. I think a lot of people are so like centered in homosexual sex when thinking about homosexual relationships, that they don't realize that like people have feelings too. It's not just about fucking. And if that's your main focal point, when you're thinking about those types of relationships, like why is that? It has nothing to do with you. And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think like what you said about like obviously the word gay and other kind of homophobic slurs that used to be thrown around, I think we still have a bit of a problem because kids use the term gay very loosely, and like as in reference to if somebody don't like your trainers, they say, oh, that's so gay. Or if they don't like, you know, something that you're doing. And what that does is that actually takes some of the humanity out of somebody's identity. And this kind of leads into why I don't like the labels thing, but we'll get onto that.
Definitely.
But at the same time, I think if you can just loosely like describe an inanimate object as gay and not recognize that actually that's a core part of an individual's identity, like something that makes them them, then you don't understand really like the struggles of a gay person. You just think, oh, it's just a word or it's just a title or whatever, let me just take whatever. And I think it was interesting as well that you spoke about like obviously the older generation and like what they're like and how they view gender and sexuality, and that they're still so kind of archaic in their mindset.
That's
like
a very good word to use.
my family, for example, are quite you know what, let me not do them dirty because I have to say not everyone's like that, but I do have some very homophobic members of my family. And like my family are due to go away or to go home at Christmas. And my mom was saying, oh, you know, if you go to your grandma's, just
Hold it down.
well, basically saying that my mom's inviting my partner, because I guess if I had to attach a label to myself, I would say I'm a queer woman. But I don't like labels, so anyway. But yeah, my mom was saying like if we go to my grandma's house that basically me and my partner can't stay there. And that you know, just for my own comfort, it would be a good shout to get like an Airbnb for the nights when we're down at that side of Jamaica. And I was like, so hold on, you want me to pay my good money to come to Jamaica to go and see a woman who doesn't want me in her house because my partner's a woman? Like,
you can't even put your whole self in a suitcase.
Yeah, and
you can't even pack your whole belonging
You know what I mean?
and go on holiday. That is mad.
And my thing is, I'm more than happy to go to Jamaica and not go and see her, you know? But God forbid I ever did. God forbid I ever did.
Gets
but
political still.
It's a bit double standard.
Yeah, and it's mad because like in my family, like my mom's been, and I have to give her this, but I think at the same time, for me, I wasn't coming out to no one because what am I coming out for? When I was dating men, nobody needed me to come out then, so I'm not coming out now. But when I turned around to her and I said, don't be surprised if I bring my girlfriend home to Christmas dinner, she was like, well, your family already think you're gay. You cut your hair, so, you know.
Bruh,
yeah,
just like that.
All of them kind of labels. And I was kind of like, so hold on, because I'm bald and because I've always been a little bit
Being
on the
bold is
maybe...
lit, people. Remember that.
I've always been on the more like, I would say I straddle the line of masculine, feminine. I think I'm quite feminine, but I guess I've always been a little bit tomboyish. I think people just attach that to, oh, okay, now she ain't got no hair, she must be gay, which is wild. But I remember like, and actually that ties into thinking about like a situation. I'll get back onto the Jamaica thing in a second, but I remember like telling my mom about, you know, bringing my partner to Christmas dinner, and she was like, oh, you know, we're not in Jamaica anymore, so as long as you're happy, I don't care. Like, nobody's going to prosecute you for being who you are or dating who you want to date. And it's funny because like, I think some of my family members are just like whispering in their kind of jacket collars about my life. And then at the same time, kind of telling me that it's a phase and oh, it's fine, but you never know, you might still end up with a man and be able to have a baby naturally. My auntie's exact words. And I just think to myself, that would be interesting because I've seen your life ending up with a man, and honestly, I don't think I would choose that. No, I'm joking. Don't get me wrong.
How did it work out for you?
Yeah, like, and sometimes you have to like sit there and think like, why? And no offense, because I know I'm in a room full of men. Like, why do you idealize male-female relationships when at the end of the day, for a lot of you, they're not idealistic. And not saying that that's why I chose, because people love to put out that word, you're choosing this life. But I'm with the person I'm with because they make me happy, not because they happen to have a vagina. I mean, that's great too. But like that's really it. And I think a lot of people don't focus on that side of things. They focus on like the sex when you're thinking about homosexual relationships, and I think that's very limiting. And even like I brought a friend of mine to like a family get together. My friend was my friend just because I happened to date her after the fact. She was my friend at the time, but that's not the point. And my uncle, because I guess she was very like masculine presenting, and so you would say overtly showing signs that she was gay. She didn't have a shirt on. She had a turtleneck, like a black turtleneck, and like jeans and trainers. But she's quite masculine, like, and I think my uncle just decided to like fixate on her, poor girl. And I said to him, like, leave her alone. Kept asking her.
You up, bro.
Nah, for real. Like, she does taekwondo. She could fuck him up. Literally. Like, she could fuck him up. Honestly. Like, I've seen her throw good sized men across the room. So it's very, very possible. Yes, but like, he was so fixated on her, I guess, again, because she was masculine presenting, and he was making assumptions that she was my partner, and like kept asking her questions like, you know, oh, if you guys are together, it's okay, you can tell me, you know. And she was like, no, like, we're just friends, like, allow it. And he then, like, the drunker he got, obviously his feelings came out a bit more. He was asking her questions about like what she did, and she was saying that obviously she's a teacher, and he was like, oh, I wouldn't send my kids to your school.
Whoa.
Like, as in, I wouldn't want my kids to be taught by you because you're gay. Like, what? Am I going to start teaching your kids how to be gay? Like, I'm sorry, but last time I checked, there was no school of education for that. Like,
acting like there's secret modules or something.
Honestly, and it was wild. And I literally, like, it got towards the end of the evening, and I kept saying to her, just ignore him. Just ignore him. Like, we weren't even sat together because I was trying to like minimize the situation.
Or was he trying to like follow and stuff to carry on the
yeah, like, he just wouldn't let it go. And then eventually he got so pissed, he took my mom off into the kitchen and my sister, and he's there effing and blinding, calling me all sorts of names, calling her all sorts of names, asking my mom how she's going to let me come into her house and disrespect her like that. All of these things because my gay friend came for dinner. And my mom was like, what did she do? Like, what are you on about? Like, it's not like you've seen them sat together kissing and hugging and holding hands and you could feel offended by that. But either way, disgraceful.
They don't understand, Uncle, but fuck's sake.
No, but
people are just out here existing.
It was literally the wildest thing.
Plates.
It was the wildest thing. And I just thought to my mom was like, oh, you know what? I feel like for your peace, the way he was going on, like, you guys should leave. And that's the reality of my life. Like, I'm in a space now, and because I happen to be in a relationship with a woman, and like, my partner, she's more feminine presenting. So I guess for a lot of people, like, they don't even see her as my partner. They just see her as my friend. Like, I don't know where I was the other day, and I think I referred to her as my girlfriend, and like the person came up and was like, oh, so like, oh, we went for for dinner, and I was talking to her. Obviously, we came in, we're holding hands, we kissed before we sat down at the table. And then at the end, the girl's gonna be like, oh, so are you guys splitting the bill, or are you paying for your friend, or whatever? And I thought to myself, are you blind or are you just stupid? Like, and I think people automatically assume that if you don't present a certain way, even in a homosexual relationship, you still have that gendered construct of male and female, and like the whole kind of like one person has to be a bit more masculine and the other person has to be a bit more feminine. And so if both of you turn up to a restaurant in a dress, people are confused. And I'm like, for what reason? Like, this is my identity. This is how I present my gender. So at the end of the day, why does it matter that it doesn't fit to that kind of gender normative, heterosexual narrative that's put out there? And I think it just kills me. It honestly kills me. Like, I feel like it's wild.
I just ask, in that situation as well, like, because obviously I've never been in it, but I would love to know, like, because I would spaz out. Like, I would,
most definitely.
That's like my natural reaction. When I feel disrespected, my natural reaction is to spaz out. Like, for you, do you feel like you've had to kind of adapt yourself to everyone else's naivety, for example?
So that's a really funny question for me, because I feel like to a certain extent, yeah, but at the same time, no, because I'm also of the mindset, fuck you. Like, period. If you've got a problem, that's your own business. I honestly do not care. Like, it makes no difference to my life, because it makes you a very sad person if you're more focused on my life and my existence and who I choose to be with than on your own shit. Because half the time, the people who shout the loudest, it's because their life is fucking miserable. But at the same time, I think... And they can't fight. Honestly, you've got so much stuff to say,
so much
but
to talk about.
No, but I think at the same time, I feel like you also have to give people grace. And I say that very, very loosely, because I feel like there are so many intersections in my life where I feel like I constantly have to give people grace, that I'm tired of it. Like, not only am I a queer woman, not only am I queer, I'm a woman and I'm Black. Like, all of those intersections create their own issues. And if I have to always be considerate of other people's feelings, I get lost in that. And I'm tired of it. I'm not doing it. So I'm in a bit of a place where in certain settings, I'll check you. In other settings, I'll be like, you know what? I'm tired. It's been a long day. I've had enough. I'm going home.
I'll be real with you. Like, I couldn't do it. When it comes to like protecting other people's feelings or sanity over my own, especially when I know they're in the wrong, like, I have to commend you for that. That is a personal, to have that trait, to be able to do that. I say, like, yeah, pure respect to you, because I just know myself in it, and in those kind of situations, like, I know what my reaction would be, and it would just be to spaz out. So.
Yeah, I can kind of relate with you on that though, because like last week I was doing a webinar at work, and we was talking about like code switching and like what that means and how it kind of links to, like, I suppose, foregoing yourself to make others feel comfortable, to like hide your stereotypes, whatever they might be. And then someone asked me a question about like, oh, how do you, seeing how you like code switch so much, whether you're like at work or anything else, like how do you protect like your mental space? And I was given the answer of how I do it, and then I was like, raw, I don't, you know, like I actually don't, when I think about it, I don't, because almost similar to what you were saying, like it's that bit of leeway that you sometimes feel you might have to give people in terms of like where they might be in their awareness journey, and things like that. And that's always a consideration. So sometimes someone might say something that might make me spaz or want to spaz out from like a racial point of view. but I'm kind of then almost backpedaling and almost, I suppose, justifying it to a certain extent. So I can kind of get that, but I kind of wanted to go back just a little bit to kind of what you were saying, Jay, about how like in terms of kind of how being gay is perceived, how it's changed, and it's much different from way back when we were younger to now. And like, yeah, it's true. And even kind of what you was talking about with your uncle, Rams, like for me, I don't understand like straight people's fascination with anything that is non-straight. I don't get it. And even when he was talking about like the fighting bit, like most of them can't even fight anyway. It reminded me of when I was in school. Like there was a black guy, I think he was like a year older than me, and like kind of from an aesthetic point of view, you would think that he was gay. Whether he was or wasn't, I don't know. But everyone treated him as such. And because of that, they threw out those homophobic slurs that we won't repeat on here. And no one really spoke to him. He mostly like chilled with the girls and stuff. So kind of those are like his friendship base. But for like a guy to chill with him, it would kind of be seen as like weakness, almost as though if he's gay and you chill with him, it's almost
gonna
like
rub off on you.
he's gonna transfer the gayness onto you. And the man that was saying this were a man that was supposed to be road man veterans and this and the other. But I remember one day, I got into it with like some next guys after school. And these same people that I was with that will tell you don't chill with my man because of this and the other. They were with me when it was the talking stage, when punches, bricks, bottles, and poles were flying. Them man were gone.
Ghosts.
Do you know who's there though? My man, who they said was a pussy old this or whatever they may have said. He was the one that was there, protected me, got me out of the situation. And I remember after that, I was scratching my head thinking, a lot of things aren't adding up here. Like
The math isn't mathing.
the maths is weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird. Like you have this fascination about my man, and you throw so many negative connotations towards man. But in what your definition of what being a man is, in the one time it's there to be displayed,
he was the only
my
one
man
that was
stepped
a
up
man.
by your definition of what being a man is.
You know what? I think part of the fascination from heterosexual people around homosexuals and their life, I think a lot of it, like I said before, is centered in sex. But I think also there's been quite a problematic rhetoric around homosexual relationships because of the AIDS epidemic. And I think from that point on, it was literally like, okay, if I touch you,
So
I'm gonna get AIDS. So I need you to stay the fuck away from me. And then all of the homophobic slurs and all the things that came with that is what we are now unlearning, which is why people are now in a better space or in a more accepting space of difference, or, you know, people's sexual identities or their gender or whatever it might be. And I think as much as I get it, at the same time, there was so much misinformation put out in like the 60s, 70s, around that time, around AIDS and transmission and all of that kind of stuff, that it's now left a lifelong lasting like impact on the LGBT community. And I think, why are we not doing enough to change the script on that? Like the narrative isn't being pushed. Like this new information around HIV and the fact that literally like no one ever gets AIDS anymore. Like AIDS is the end stage of HIV. So for you to get to that point, you would have had HIV and left it untreated, which, unless you're probably in somewhere that's impoverished and no access to medication, that's not going to happen. And even then, if you are exposed to the HIV virus within a certain time frame, you can actually take medication and it can come out of your body. You can also have unprotected sex if you wanted to with the right medication and not transmit the virus. So the thought of it coming to kill someone as it was pushed before isn't the case. And I think there was a TV show recently, actually. I can't remember what TV show it was, but there was somebody in it. The woman was HIV positive and she was round at her friends for like a dinner date or something. And it was really interesting because it showed her like cutting up some food and like the knife cut her and like the entire room like gasped and ran and and she was like, oh, you just need to wash everything off with hot water and it's all fine. And the woman whose house she was at was like, no, took everything, threw it in the bin. And she was like, no, like if you just rinse it off and stick it in the dishwasher like anybody else got cut, it'll be fine. Yeah. She was so adamant and against it because there is still that stigma around HIV.
That becomes offensive.
Yeah. And I think this is where education then comes into play, why it's so important and why actually we need to have these conversations because there is still so much misinformation. And that was 60 years ago. Yeah. Why is that still what's understood around sex and the certain implications that come with sex for young people?
I'm saying in school it was always the white plastic thing.
He's called Bobby because the real ones are called battery operated boyfriends. So it's a little
the real what?
So like actual dildos or vibrators, battery operated boyfriends. A lot of people refer to them in that way. So I called my demonstrator Bobby. But I had
something today.
I had like a variety of them, but my personal one that I always carried in my kit was brown because I made a point of saying that it was a brown man. Mm-hmm. So no, they don't. And the reason why they don't come bigger is because actually the average penis size in the UK is 5.5 inches. And people are out here always selling dreams, saying that they have these humongous penises. I'm not speaking for anyone in this room, but people are always selling dreams that their penises are humongous. And actually it's about like less than 10% of the population have like over a 7-inch penis.
Right, tell me, have your studies found, because I'm sure the people want to know, do black guys have bigger willies than white guys? From your studies.
From information I've read, that distinction has never been made. But from personal experience, not that I've ever seen, I've seen a white penis. I have seen a white penis.
You can't judge me on one.
I've seen a white penis. That's why I can't make a judgment. Still. Yeah, I can't make that judgment. But speaking to... no, that's a lie. No, I've seen more than one. No, I've seen more than one white penis, and one of them was micro, which was fucking mortifying. Actually mortifying. Like I was stressed.
I'm sure he was.
No, it was my friend was dating a guy, and basically, she was like, "Oh, they kept like kissing for ages," and she's like, "All right."
Let's crack on.
Are we getting there or not? Yeah. And then they went on to the foreplay, and the foreplay was like an hour and a half. And she's like, for fuck's sake, man, just get on with it. And he whipped it out, and it was this big, like no exaggeration. I think this is even like remove the nail. Like he pulled that out, and I think she laughed. She laughed, like she couldn't hold it in. She laughed, and the man almost died. But so and she took a picture, which is why.
What, while she was laughing at him?
No, so he left to go in the bathroom, and like
he didn't leave to go home after getting laughed at.
Listen, I think he knows. He knows. He's used to it. Yeah. But basically, he was in the bathroom like brushing his teeth, standing there with nothing on, and she basically took a picture, like, whilst he couldn't see. So we all got a nice little chuckle. It was fucking fantastic.
Hey, see that? Look, confession on camera, yeah? Yeah, you giggle. Whatever guy did that. Yeah?
So,
the group chat and that, yeah?
Firstly, if we're thinking about sex education, that's illegal. Do that, which is why I didn't point out my friend's name. But yeah, that's illegal. Don't do that ever. But it's the group chat.
Just see it allegedly happening. It's fine.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly it happens. But yeah, in terms of like sex ed and stuff, I think there has been improvements. Even in the 3 years that I worked in that field, I saw lots of differences from where we started to after the guidance was implemented. And the fact that schools, well, they knew they had no choice. So they had to start actually getting education out there. And like lots of schools would like, they pay us like, they pay us good money. Like there were some boroughs that provide funding to our organization. So where I worked, like we got funding in certain boroughs, but some of them would only be like limited funding, which is another thing. So the government have asked you to implement these programs, but don't give you any money to do it, which is a bit of a joke. And even like the schools would end up having to go and buy like programs to deliver to the kids if they were gonna do it themselves.
Just a quick question. Do you think, obviously we've spoken about sex ed, but do you think the actual programmers pressured schools into like
doing more
and maybe revamping the way that they do things? Because now there's obviously a show out there that's showing kids of similar ages and how they think.
And do you know another one that's out there as well?
What's that?
That Big Mouth program.
Yeah, Big Mouth is
that's out
on
there.
smoke.
And that is this is teaching people about things.
Even Gossip Girl to a certain extent shows like how it can be in terms of sexuality and how it's deemed by different sections of people as well. So,
I think sex ed came at a really good time. I don't necessarily think it pushed schools to do more, but I think what it did was push schools to be a bit more creative in how they were doing it. Because I think for a lot of them, they realized that conversations were being had. You just weren't privy to it. Like kids were, like I remember in my time at school, kids are doing shit behind the back shed. That has not changed. In fact, it's probably just gotten worse because they now record each other and they send each other nudes and all of those things. And I think part of the important aspects of sex ed that's now been incorporated is talking about the legality of things, because you can't have kids going and engaging in sexual activity and not realizing that there are laws around this. And although it's unlikely that you're going to be prosecuted if you have sex under the age of 16, it could happen. You know, or if you've produced sexual
sending the nudes,
you've produced sexual imagery. Like there's something called a Section 21, which is normally what is recorded under by the police. So it's not necessarily like if there's consent, and we'll come back to talking about that. But if there's consent and there's no kind of coercion or forced, or like both parties have been happy to engage in that interaction, then it would be recorded under that. But if there's any pressure, anything that suggests that one person didn't want to do this, then they could be prosecuted. I even had a young person actually that I worked with, and he thought for bants, he would send a dick pic to all the Muslim girls in his school.
What?
And he's now on the sexual offences register because it's actually he got arrested and prosecuted for it because it's considered a hate crime. But he's also now on the sexual offences register until he's 18. And I'm like, dude, like, do you know how much that fucks up your life? And this is where the education becomes even more important.
And it's mad because the way it's premeditated as well. Like he's saying, I want to piss off these girls because I know they think a certain way. And this is going to be like sacrilege to them, basically.
And I think that's the issue. Kids don't fully understand the consequences of their actions. And they don't understand what are some of the potential repercussions that come from A, engaging in sex, but B, all the other things that come with it. And I think one of the biggest topics of conversation that needs to be had, if schools are choosing not to talk about anything, they need to talk about consent. because we've
100.
seen, even in the last year or so, even look at the Sarah Everard situation. And there are so many misconceptions around consent, and I don't get it. Like, people think that there's grey areas in consenting. No, there's not. It's very black and white. It's very, very straightforward. But I think for a lot of people, they assume that consent is a yes. But it's not just a yes. It has to be a big, enthusiastic, leaping for joy, you're gagging for it type of yes. Like, and if you don't understand that, you are potentially getting into situations where you are sexually assaulting or raping people. And it's something that happens on a day-to-day basis. I cannot tell you a woman that I know personally that hasn't experienced some sort of sexual violence in their life and doesn't categorize it in that way because of the connotations that's attached to saying I've been raped or I've been sexually assaulted, but that's what's happened. And it's because either toxic masculinity feeds into the way we talk to young men about consent and sex and what they're entitled to or not entitled to, or they're just not having any conversations as it is. And so I think sex ed has a huge place in schools, but not enough is still being done, in my personal opinion, because I know for me, when I come to talk about it, I'm giving it to you straight. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. There's no prettying it up. There's none of that. Like, I'd gone into classrooms and the first questions I get from a kid is, what's 69? And they think it's banter and it's going to throw me off. And I'm like, okay, it's a sexual position that people do this and and we'll have a conversation with a straight ass face. And they'll be there like, oh, okay.
I can't throw her off, you know.
I can't throw her off. There's nothing I can say. And if you talk to kids and you give them the information and you do it in the right way, you're creating spaces where actually they'll ask you questions that they then need to know.
Yeah.
Like, I had a young person and he was sexually active. His girlfriend was pregnant. She's 12. He's 13.
What?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
she knew she was pregnant. He was really, really scared about going and asking for help or support or figuring out options or whatever it might be, because all he thought was, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble. There's an age difference. And if there's an age difference, and the way the law works as well, it's wild. So because she's 12, and even if they believe they've consented for sexual activity, it says that at 12, you don't have the capacity to consent, which basically means that would be classed as statutory rape because he's 13 and she's 12. So technically at 13, he can consent because there's a grey area in the law. But at 13, at 12, she can't. So there was also that fear. He doesn't want to get in trouble. They don't want to have a baby, but they're not going to sexual health clinics because they know what comes with it, or they don't know what comes with it, and they're thinking, oh, that someone's going to tell my parent, and that's all.
I can't lie, you just educated me, because I'm thinking, rah, she's 12, he's 13, so they're like
similar age,
less than a year between them, surely.
Yeah.
So I know,
but
like,
then man could
Juliet
be
laws
getting
are
done for rape at 13.
Yeah,
and
so
if I don't know that as a grown-ass man, how's a 12, 13-year-old boy gonna know that?
That's going through that shock and living through that experience and is scared. Like,
and then imagine, sorry to
thinking
continue, but imagine it does go that far now and he's got that on his record as a rapist, for example. Like, he's got to carry that for the rest of his life.
So the thing with and this is another thing which is confusing with the law, it depends on the, what do they call it? Is it the burden of, like, as in, if it's in public interest, they will prosecute. If it's not in public interest, they won't prosecute, which is, and so it's hard. So even though it would be classed as statutory rape, that doesn't necessarily mean the police would prosecute him. But
as in, he's not like a further danger to society.
Yeah. And so it also depends, because if that girl's parents then choose to raise the prosecution, they will have to go forward with it, which means it would then be on his record. So there's so many different factors involved. And at the end of the day, the way the police would even go forward with it is so different to how sexual health provisions would go forward with it as well. Because, like, for us, a 12-year-old, obviously because she can't consent, we would make a referral to social care. most likely, depending on if we think the young person's at a greater risk. If we don't tell anyone, but if we do tell someone, and like, let's say for example, if it was me and I went home at 12 and I was pregnant, my mom would cut my throat. My mom would cut my throat.
She don't understand.
Trust me. We're trying to understand.
So if I went to a sexual health clinic and said that to the nurse and said, I'm considering an abortion, they would have to weigh up and they would have to do a competency assessment, whether it was a safe thing for them to tell somebody that this has happened to me or not. Because the potential consequences is, if you tell my parent, I'm dead. So weigh this out. And I think, it's hard for kids because there's so much information. There's so many different concepts that you even learn in sex education. It's not just about the sex. And I think that's where a lot of parents fall short, is they think it's literally, I'm teaching your kid how to penis enter vagina and that's it. They don't realize that sex ed also comes with healthy relationships. It comes with consent. It comes with even boundaries and talking to people about what's safe and how to respect each other. Like all of those things come into play. And so if you're not having those conversations with kids from a young age and kind of having steps where you're building on the information, year after year, and it becoming more kind of embedded and age appropriate, then how do you envisage that when a young person gets to 16 even, where you're saying, okay, you're legally now able to consent, how do you envisage that they have the information that they need to engage in sexual activity safely, healthily, and in an environment that they feel safe and like able to? Like it's not going to happen because you can't learn something overnight. Like it doesn't just, I woke up, I'm 16 this morning. That means like my body's now changed. My brain has now evolved. I now know all the things I need to know. And I'm going to be a perfect person in society and engage in great, safe sex. It doesn't happen like that. Like it's virtually
Do you know
impossible.
as well? Just saying that as something I always remembered, obviously, like that day where you turn legal, innit? And it's like, bro, like yesterday, I couldn't do nothing.
Yeah.
Today, I'm a man. It's
a new
like
day.
that difference between one day, your whole life changes. And it's like, I remember feeling like I'm a man now, innit? I can literally go and do whatever the fuck I want. No one can tell me anything. I'm an adult. But the difference between being 17 and 18, that one day difference is, like you're saying, my education hadn't grown over that one day.
Yeah, there was no big realization.
There was no fucking like quick fix where it's like, okay, I'm 17, I'm 18 tomorrow. I need to learn everything by tomorrow, so I'm ready for my adult life. There was none of that. So yeah, it's just like, boy, like you're saying, from a young age, it needed to be introduced. So by the time I was legal, then I would have had all the education behind me to make better decisions probably as well.
You know what as well, with the whole like, I'm legal now thing, when you look at stats, so the average age for first time sex in the UK is 16, and statistically in comparison to like other European countries, we are the worst. We are the worst. Worst. And the worst part is,
like bottom barrel worst?
Yeah, like bottom of the barrel.
Shit.
And the worst part is, for a lot of them, their age of consent is like 12 or 13, 11, 12 or 13, somewhere around there. Different countries slightly different. But if we look at like most of the Nordic countries, for example, their legal age of consent, I believe, is 12. Their average age for first time sex is 21. What? So what is it that they're doing that we're not doing? They are doing holistic education from day dot. Like their kids are having these lessons from reception. They're having conversations around relationships. They're having conversations about sex, blah, 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 blah. Obviously not telling a 5-year-old, anal sex, oral sex, vaginal sex, but they're having the conversations that need to be had. And I think it's crazy that we've never really taken like a page out of their book
Mm.
in terms of seeing what they're doing, seeing that we have high teenage pregnancy rates, our average age of sex somehow falls in line with the age that kids are allowed to
could
have sex.
pillaged one thing. It could have been that still.
But I think
We
they do this
we
all
could
the
take
time.
a lot from their countries, man. Because I swear,
You can
even when they
steal
do,
artifacts and all of that from
Bruh.
other places, but not just a bit of
because with
knowledge.
these Nordic countries, I swear, when they do the happiness test,
Them people
living-
be happy.
Their levels are through the roof.
Very.
Honestly, even look at COVID, and don't get me started, but half of those countries were in much better positions than we were
Mm.
because they,
With less resources.
yeah, with
as
less
well.
resources, they were sensible. They got on with it. And I think in this country, we just have this, especially when it comes to sex, we have this like stiffer upper lip attitude whereby we think,
Superior.
those things happen behind closed doors, so let's leave the conversations there. And I'm like, realistically, it doesn't though. It doesn't. People are out here literally fucking in public. So you need to be able to have these conversations loud in public. Like you need to talk about it. And even like, I know we were just saying about like girls group chat. A lot of the times me and my girls are there talking about all sorts of madness in the group chat, but we'll never ask these conversations of our male friends or our male partners or whatever it might be because of that, like almost like prudishness that we seem to attach to sex in this country. Like it's something that we compartmentalize and that we talk about in the corner and whisper into our jacket, but we don't do it in the way that it should be done. Like at the end of the day, we all know that people are fucking. Like it's happening. It's happening because babies are being born all the time. So people are having sex. So why are we not having the conversations that come with that too?
Do you know what sprung to mind as you said that? A meme I saw yesterday on IG, like some video of like some guy, and it was like 3 other men, and the brother was saying like, oh yeah, he says, I don't believe women can orgasm. Within the first 3 seconds of the video, I said, what? And he says, if they are, something's wrong. I don't believe none of that shit.
What?
And you see,
he believes that.
He says, I don't believe none of that women having orgasm shit.
Still
I'm watching this
dick
thinking, what is this man? Like, this is a middle-aged man
Why you
at
laughing?
least saying this.
Why are you crazy?
And the other guys are like, yeah, man, we agree with you. Yeah,
No, honestly,
women come in. What now? What's that?
They all got little dick.
men are mad. Men
I don't
are
get it.
mad. Yeah, men are mad. And the reason why I'm laughing is because funny you should say that, but I actually feel like that is a real concept, like a real idea that men have. Like, and yes, I'm generalizing here, so don't shoot me.
It's from them guys that can't mash properly. That's what
I just think that I don't necessarily agree with that because I don't think a lot of men.
No, if you've made a woman come, then it defeats the object.
I
innit?
think a lot of men aren't centered in women's pleasure. Like it's all about let me get my nut and cut.
Boy, I'm not saying I'm of that ilk, but yeah, I know a lot of guys do have
Think
that
like that,
kind of
yeah,
mentality.
yeah.
Still.
They'll just nut, roll over and start snoring.
Yeah, like
Do you know what?
honestly.
Even me, I'll be real, yeah. All throughout my life, I was gonna say sexual career, you know. They don't pay me for this shit, but career, bro. Like, but all throughout my sexual life, should I say, like, obviously, yeah, I wanna feel enjoyment, but for me, I got enjoyment of making the woman feel enjoyment. So yeah, that was what I kind of fed off. So when a guy kind of comes with that mentality, I'm just like, bruv.
In all honesty,
I don't get it. And like, people talk at the end of the day. So even if you don't care about the woman, like, don't you care about your reputation? Like, it don't make sense.
But a woman could openly tell you, yeah, I can come. And he'll then tell a woman to her face, nah, you can't, bruv, that's your little dick energy, bruv.
100.
You're not making women come. A woman's there telling you the answer, I can. And you're still saying, nah, you can't.
I don't know. I think, like women's pleasures for a long time had been like shoved in a corner and ignored. Like it's not seen as something that's important for a lot of men. And I think it's quite problematic. And then that kind of gets me to thinking, like, I remember I got asked a question by a colleague at work one time, and I honestly wanted to punch her in the face.
Oh.
But she said to me, like, what happened with men that made me choose
That question,
to basically be in relationships with women.
Because it couldn't possibly be anything else.
Because it couldn't possibly be anything else. And for the sake of not losing my job, because I bottled her across her head for asking me that question, I chose to just, like, take a deep breath and said, as a joke, I was just kind of like, yeah, I come. And that was the end of the conversation. And she looked at me like she was confused. And I was like, no, I come. That's it.
Wait.
And
she didn't know that her confusion was aiding the point.
Coming with them Usyk vibes, like I
feel. And like it's mad because a lot of people just think that's the only reason that women are in lesbian relationships anyway, because men can't make us come. But boy, like you're so narrow-minded. I mean, women do it better. Just saying. Shout out to my babes.
I wanna before we leave this sofa, there's two things I want us to talk about. I know we've spoken a lot about sexuality. We're supposed to talk about gender a bit as well. We've not
Dave
Chappelle.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm segueing to.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking Dave. Yes, we haven't spoken about gender much, but it's something that Dave Chappelle spoke a lot about in his special, the Closer. And I remember because I've seen all of his Netflix specials. I'm sure we all have.
Yeah.
And
wait, sorry. Did you say the Closer?
The Closer, isn't it?
The Closer.
Isn't it the Closer?
Closer.
That's what I said. The Closer.
Oh, I thought you said the Closer, as in like closer together. My bad. Sorry, bro. Sorry.
I don't even know what I said.
What did you hear, man? What did you hear?
I'm baff now.
So you did kind of say a bit funny, but
yeah?
it's all right.
We
got what you meant.
I'm tired today, man. I'm tired.
My bad.
Anyways, so watching the newest special. I remember watching it and thinking, based on what I've interpreted from the special, I think I get what he's trying to do. However, if this all goes up in flames, I can see why it might go up in flames based on people's reactions. And it's been really interesting because I've had like quite a few conversations with people about the special, and I think one of the few things that I've noticed about the people who categorically disagree with it and think cancel Dave Chappelle, etc., is they're either not black, they're not a part of the LGBTQ plus community, they've not actually seen the special, they've only gone on articles, clips, and headlines. Yeah, or they're a mixture of the above. So I found it quite hard to kind of really gauge what kind of people think of the special, because I think for me, I enjoyed it. I didn't really see it as a comedy. I didn't think it was that funny per se. I saw it more as like social commentary of Dave Chappelle talking about what currently is, not glorifying it in any such way, but saying this is the state of play. This is how there are some people in society feel.
I think it was definitely like there was an element of like comedic irony, and I think part of the problem that I find with people and comedians is that they don't quite separate the art from the artist, and I have a big problem with that whole sentiment generally. Anyway, R. Kelly. But at the same time, I think in this instance, you're right in that for me, what I could see was him trying to be ironic and trying to make a point of the messages or the conversations that are currently being had around the trans community in society are dumb. Like, just leave people alone. And I go back to my statement of, like, if it has nothing to do with your life and your experience, why are you so, like, attached to it? Why do you have such a problem with it? Like, I think there was a show and somebody I can't remember who it was, but it was like either like a actor or someone, and they used the term a natural woman in reference to people being able to have children. And this is again where a lot of the issues with trans women especially come from. Now, obviously, I don't know how much you guys know about the trans community, but like statistically, the average like life expectancy for a trans woman is like 42. And
42 years old.
42 years old. Yeah. And a lot of it is to do with the way kind of people almost criminalize trans people. So like women especially are like beaten, might commit suicide, or literally are murdered. I think it's like 2 trans people a week in the UK, trans women a week in the UK are murdered. Like for the sake of saying I'm a trans woman, for example. And
is that like fact though?
Yeah, like fact.
Because like, I mean, like gone to court, someone said I killed that person because they were trans.
Yeah,
that is fucking mad.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so like there's a massive problem, and I think yeah, it's just difficult because I think I see like what you're saying about like obviously him saying what he's saying and people might not quite get what he's trying to get at, and I can also see why someone might take offense to it. But I think also what I said to you before is that him as a comedian, he always has problematic conversations about lots of different communities.
Yeah.
He talks about black people, he talks about white people, he talks about gender, sex, whatever it is.
Drugs.
And the uproar has never been this loud.
Yeah, because my thing is, listen, he's not new.
No.
He's been doing this for decades. I've seen him talk about Black America, White America, poor White America, lots of other different things for what, about 2 decades plus.
Yeah.
And obviously that's just kind of seeing this just get people wanting to cancel him like with so much fervor, I find quite surprising. I think for me, I think the biggest thing is, because what I'd say is at the same time, I'm not trans. So if someone who is trans or a trans ally takes offense to what he says, I can understand it, having watched it as well. But I think the thing for me that that frustrates me with what's not being used with this special is, why aren't we using it to maybe have those dialogues that we should be having? All the articles that I'm seeing from people is focusing on cancelling Dave Chappelle, the comedian, rather than, all right, cool, let's actually look about what he was talking about. It's even things where he was talking about kind of how, I suppose, black people perceive like the LGBTQ plus community. I was sitting there nodding like, yeah, like I've categorically heard people say some of these things. Like I remember when we wanted to start our racial equity group at work, you know, there were some people that were like, yeah, listen, I'm all for it, I want to be a part of it. However, I don't want to work with the pride group because the way we see it is they almost leech off our struggle kind of thing. So we want to be separated from them. Like there are black people that think like that. I see it a little bit differently in terms of for you to get the change and the release of power, you need intersectionality. That's kind of how I see it, but not everyone does. So some people might feel a way about kind of the LGBTQ plus community because of that. So I would have liked to have seen people taking what Dave Chappelle said. If you want to vilify him, brilliant. But can we have something productive off the back of that? Can we start progressing some of these dialogues that we have, so we're not in a position where the average life expectancy for a trans person is 42. That's middle age life expectancy ages. That's wild.
I was told life starts at 40 and that. Saying
you know what I mean?
2 years start to life and it's done. That's not right.
It's fucked.
That is not right. And yeah, off the back of that, how I saw Dave talking about it, I'll be honest, I could relate to it. in the fact that to me it felt more not like a man that had sat down for hours and had wrote comedy. It didn't feel like that to me. It sounded and it felt more like, yo, guys, I'm Dave Chappelle. I've been all over the world. I've met a lot of people, and this is just shit that I actually go through on a day-to-day basis. Now, I don't know if it's because I am Dave Chappelle and things are a bit more amplified, but this is how I live. So that's why I liked it, because there were certain things that he was saying that I could definitely relate to, certain instances. And then I was just thinking, raw, like, I don't think man sat down and wrote about that, like, and made it up for comedic purpose. Do you understand? Like, this sounds more like a man that is, yeah, he's writing comedic things, but he's giving it to us from a real life perspective. So like you're saying, Jay, like, why are we not, instead of vilifying the man, why are we not looking at the real life aspect? Because that's what it feels like and where he's coming from. And then implementing those kind of conversations like, rah, you know, that's happening in everyday life, not just probably to Dave Chappelle, but to a lot of people. So yeah, those are my thoughts, that it was quite like he was trying to educate people in a humorous way. Obviously he's not the speaker for it, but what we have to respect is that he's been in those situations. And that's what it felt like to me. So yeah.
I think the difficulty with the whole special as a whole, like, I completely agree with both of you. I didn't see the problem with it, but I think you kind of touched on it before when you kind of said, like, you're not a trans person, you're not a person of trans experience, this isn't your real life, this isn't your experience. And I think for a lot of people who are in marginalized communities, so we could be talking about the blacks, the gays, the whoever, when you feel like somebody is attacking you, even if that's not what's happening, your automatic response is like you're peacocking. You put your back up. You go, you get defensive. And I think people have been so used to, within the trans community, being attacked, that even if that's not what's happening, they're going to see anybody talking about them, even if it's in an ironic fashion, as an attack.
They're seeing the attack rather
they're
than
seeing the attack
education.
rather than the education. And I think that's where the difficulty is, because you can't, you don't know how that person feels. You don't know what experiences they've had. You don't know how many people have called them a tranny today. You know, you don't know what those experiences are and how painful and hurtful that is. And you know, you don't know what has triggered them off. So somebody else saying something in an ironic fashion, and if you're not listening out for the irony, the likelihood is you're going to take it and be defensive, and rightfully so. Because I think anybody who feels like their identity is being attacked is going to take it some type of way. Like I would, if somebody came at me, I would feel some type of way about it. And I think that's why I understand it, but just because I understand it doesn't mean I have to agree with it. And in the same way, just because they put it out there doesn't mean they have to agree with it either. And I think there's so much, or so many different, like, intersections and attacks that's happening to people within the trans community that I get it. Like,
and just quickly as well, like, obviously me, I'm not trans myself, but one thing that did stick out for me in that is when he was speaking about a friend that he'd made in the end that was trans, and how that person said that, I think through his comedy, they felt more included, and that if he wasn't making jokes about them, then that kind of makes them feel more excluded. And I interestingly thought that was a different perspective that I didn't even consider. The fact that, yeah, like, you know, I saw a skit from him the other day where he was calling the white people nigger. That was like their surname or whatever. And it's like, rah, he's trying to be educational here, but at the same time trying to broaden the horizons of people, if that makes sense. So yeah, with that friend, I didn't think of, him making such jokes, which could be his reality, but also making them people feel included rather than secluded. I didn't see it going both ways. So that is one interesting thing I did.
Yeah,
take.
I think that. Sorry, I think that's why, like, for me, the whole like labeling thing is problematic because
Definitely.
like, I don't know if you noticed, but I always say a person of trans experience. I never say a trans woman or a trans man, and I feel like it's because actually, if we're going by the laws that be and the way that person identifies, they don't see themselves as a trans woman. They see themselves as a woman or as a man or as whomever they see themselves as. And I think the problem with our society is we like to compartmentalize every fucking little thing under the sun. And so you can't just let somebody exist in their existence and in their gender and associate with their gender in whatever way they see fit. You must be able to identify who they are down to the T, literally, the trans. So putting them in a box of saying this is a trans person means that you can go at them in the first place without like knowing who they are and like making the decision to like associate with them or date them or do whatever. You can't just let that person exist in their identity. And I think that's actually one of the big factors around deaths within the trans community is when women come out as trans who don't lead with their label, they get murdered. It happens a lot in Black communities specifically, where, you know, if you are a passing trans person who you can't necessarily tell that they've transitioned, you've then gone and declared your identity to someone, your gender identity to someone, and they've then killed you as a result of it. So I think as much as like I get why people use the label, I hate the label being there because I think it does that separation thing that Dave is kind of talking about, in the sense of actually just include everyone. If everyone gets to shit, why should we put you over here because you're like a little safe protected group? Because then that makes you feel even more secluded, left out and secluded. And I don't think that's not I can't speak for a trans person, but I don't think that's what trans people want. They want to be included and incorporated and be normal.
You know what? I mean,
then doesn't that happen with them being a part of the comedy as well?
Exactly. I was gonna say, on that note, I think we have a potential to go on. I think we all could have went on a hell of a lot more, which obviously gives us scope for a part 2. So
most definitely.
Rather than have everyone fall into sleep with too much opinions and ideas, you can never have too much. But I think we can visit this one again still. There's more conversation, education to be had. So
I think we barely touched the surface of education. But I think it's such a big topic, and I think we don't, as a society, talk about it enough. So creating spaces where the conversation's being had is really important. And I also want to put out a disclaimer. I use the term tranny in inverted commas. I don't agree with that term. So I think it's problematic and harmful and actually quite archaic. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, thank you very much for coming again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're always welcome on the Realist.
And you dropped a lot of nuggets, because there's a lot of things that I just didn't know. And I'm almost 30, so thinking about how some of our young ones have to navigate a lot of this, where adults may not want to have the conversation with him, or parents / teachers are kind of arguing with who should teach them this stuff. It's an important topic.
I know. So yeah, people, look out for potentially part 2 of sexuality.
Yeah, I need to tell that story about that teacher, which I didn't get a chance to.
Yeah. Definitely. Wow. There will be a part 2 of sexuality.
Most defo. But until then, peace.
Peace and love, man.